details related to case study, and then I will present the preliminary findings of our research paper. In the end, I will finalize with the conclusion and implication of our research.
Yes, now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, then I'd like to start with the outline of the research session. Yes, our presentation will provide with our audiences with understanding the nature of qualitative case studies. Then I will pass over the trustworthiness in qualitative case studies, which is given more attention by scholars and researchers as well. And then determining the unit of analysis in qualitative case studies. Lastly, we will finalize with the types of data sources in qualitative case studies. Now, at the end of this workshop, what we'll learn, if you ask, then the aim of this workshop is to increase the recognition of doctoral students towards the use of qualitative case studies, both in their doctoral thesis and the future possible research. And it also aims to provide doctoral students with a deeper and better understanding of the use of case studies, and thus this will shed light on these areas of concern. Now I am passing over the definitions and the nature of case studies. Case study is often identified as a qualitative form of research design, also considered as a comparative study, a retrospective study, a snapshot, or a longitudinal study. It is more often used in a wide range of disciplines and fields in the social sciences to investigate or explore several different social and political phenomena related to individuals, groups, and or organizations. And case studies provide scholars and researchers with deep and hidden meaning of phenomena studying places or sites. Now you can see on this slide the categories of case study approach. We can see in total 4 categories of case study approach. And the first is the inductive case studies, and formerly I think, as far as remember, the Dr. Rosa Tomasella provided a workshop whose topic is related to abductive research, as far as I remember, and then she went in more details about the inductive and the deductive data analysis in qualitative research methods. Now I would like to give an insight here about 4 categories, and the inductive case studies can be helpful for researchers in the course of theory building, while deductive case studies are useful for theory testing. And then the quantitative and qualitative methods are well known by researchers and scholars. I mean, for research methods. Now we can see the types of case study designs. Here we can see which is developed by Yin. The single holistic and single case embedded, and the multiple case holistic, and lastly we will explain the multiple case embedded. The single holistic design indicates the existence of only a single or one case, while a single embedded design also has subcases which single embedded units in the case of interest. The same situation applies to multiple holistic and the multiple embedded designs, except that there is more than one case to be investigated or explored. The case study method overall is conducive to investigate complex and unique phenomena, as we know, in both building and testing theories. And case study research generally emphasize detailed contextual analysis of a limited number of events or conditions and their relationships. Here, I would like to underscore the analysis of limited number because it signifies the point unit of analysis, whether researchers or scholars can use more than one, or how many people can be the sample as a or unit of analysis. Here, I would like to prefer to use unit of analysis rather than sample, because the nature of the philosophical approach of qualitative research based on this approach. Now, I am passing over the case study designs by context. There are three kinds of designs. Firstly, we can see exploratory case studies. The exploratory case studies may follow intuitive paths often perceived by others as sloppy, but as Yin also pointed out, the goal in these case studies may be justified when they seek to discover theory through directly observing some social phenomenon or in its natural environment. The type of the genre of exploratory study may be useful as a pilot study, for instance, when planning a larger or more generic investigation. On the other hand, exploratory case studies are helpful or useful when conducting causal studies or otherwise pursuing an inferential research question. In particular, in complex studies of organizations or communities, one might desire to employ multivariate cases to examine a plurality of influences. I will later explain which result we have reached in our research as a finding. And the exploratory case studies tries to originally discover and analyze the many factors and conditions that can help researchers to build a causal explanation for the case under investigation. Also, I can say that this is useful for theory development, theory testing, and theory expansion as well. Lastly, descriptive case studies comes next. In descriptive case studies, the researcher or scholars presents a descriptive theory that forms or builds the overall framework for the researcher to follow throughout the study. Here, the main aim is that to build the formation and identification of a viable theoretical orientation before outline research questions. The scholar or the researcher must also determine before starting the research what exactly the unit of analysis in the study will be. Yes, in the end, at the starting of our presentation, we also already presented some insight, and I mean the definitions of case study. But here, I will give an insight related to a qualitative case study. This point is very significant because during the course of data analysis for our research, we encountered some different points about the label of the case studies, particularly for qualitative, because while many scholars prefer to use the word research design, several researchers prefer to use case study as the kind of technical data collection method or data analysis technique. I am sorry, it is not true, because qualitative case study can be only labeled as a one of research designs among those of others. For example, the narrative research, phenomenology, grounded theory, and ethnographies. And overall, the case study method usually includes a specific feature and well-structured narratives that naturally reflect the complexities and the contradictions of real life. And it can be designed through both inductive and deductive, as we have already pointed out. And they can be qualitative or quantitative. In their purest form, case studies are limited by time and space. This point is also very significant because when the case studies are limited by time and space, this mirrors that the general ability of the findings are not wider. And this issue lead to creates the absence of trustworthiness in qualitative case studies overall. And where researchers collect detailed information through a wide variety of data collection techniques, yes, researchers can benefit from one unit of analysis or more than one. We call this triangulation in qualitative research methods, which increase the reliability of the research data. Now I am passing over the trustworthiness issue in qualitative case studies. And as you can see, the case study researchers are often criticized by positivists for the lack of objectivity and generalized ability where both reliability and validity are questioned. And the data obtained by a case study cannot be generalized to the broader population, often called with the term trustworthiness. And the issue of trustworthiness includes four main principles, namely credibility, transferability, dependability, and the confirmability, through which the legitimacy of case studies can be established. And the credibility means internal validity, while transferability signifies the external validity, and dependability is equal to reliability, while confirmability refers to objectivity. And the lesser use and preference of qualitative research, especially case study methods, may be attributed to perceived challenges and weaknesses inherent in such research, as well as the maturing nature of hospitality and research. We have also seen this problem during the course of data analysis for our research, because the qualitative case studies poorly known, and another reason is that the editors and the reviewers' reaction to qualitative case studies. I don't want to go in more details now, because I'm going to explain with more details in later slides. when I come to explain the preliminary findings of our research. And on the other hand, the issue of legitimacy for research in case study method is described with different terms such as reliable, valid, dependable, reasonable, confirmable, credible, useful, compelling, significant, and empowering. We can see more than one term here to explain the legitimacy of case studies approach. And overall, in the existing literature, 4 criteria are suggested to judge the legitimacy of case studies. These are construct validity, internal validity, external validity, and reliability. Construct validity refers to triangulation based on multiple sources of data used in research, while internal validity reflects the pattern matching to compare findings with research objectives. And the reliability is treated as dependability matter, along with which the issue of transferability that refers to external validity is one of the major problems leading to trustworthiness for qualitative case studies. In response to the issues presented above, there are several different methods to provide reliability of qualitative research, and including case studies. Triangulation is one of them, which can be used by researchers mostly. And in the meantime, it can provide rigor in a case study while increasing the validity. And besides, several quantitative techniques with statistical applications have been suggested to increase the trustworthiness of case study research, such as Krippendorff-Kappa or Cohen's-Kappa analysis, using alpha as a reliability coefficient to measure agreement among observers or coders, or employing data triangulation to make research more rigorous and credible to avoid measurement bias. In addition, researchers are suggested to apply several steps to establish legitimacy of case studies, namely increasing the sample size of the unit of analysis, employing more multiple case studies approach from comparative analysis perspective to gain deeper insights related to phenomenon under investigation, and benefiting from data triangulation that involves different and independent sources to provide acceptance of qualitative tourism researchers. Now, I will share this table because there is a misunderstanding sometimes for qualitative researchers and or scholars whether they can use only one sampling method or more than one. In our research, we have benefited from 3 of those sample techniques, because each of has a different approaches, and we can say here, for example, convenience, criterion, homogeneous, opportunistic, maximum variation, purposeful, or stratified purposeful. And as you can see, each of these sampling has different meanings and practicalities. As opposed to large-scale quantitative surveys, case studies require intense examination of an individual object or a small number of objects. Case study research is often preferred by researchers when the main research questions are how or why questions. And secondly, the researcher has little or no control over behavioral events, and the concentration of the research is a contemporary as opposed to entirely historical phenomena. And lastly, and most importantly, researchers should use qualitative case studies for particularly unexplored or underexamined topics, for which little or limited empirical evidence exists in the extant literature. Now my presentation will turn with the types of data sources in qualitative case studies. Overall, we can say there are 6 types of data sources in case studies, namely documentation, archival records, interviews, face-to-face or interviews with group, and direct observations, participant observation, and the physical artifacts. Documents and document analysis can be complementary to other sources in qualitative case studies, or they may even be the sole source. And notes, case reports or contracts, annual reports, diaries, drafts, or expert opinions are regarded as some of the documents from which researchers can benefit. And observation is often used by researchers to collect data in cases when there is limited or no attainable from other methods. It can be grouped into 5 categories itself. And interviews can be applied face-to-face or over the phone or even online. And during the lockdown, because of the pandemic, most of us have experienced this kind of data collection method from the home through phone or online is a very useful alternative in such challenging times. The same applies to qualitative research as well. And the photography and films can be crucial part of visual psychology, which has the increasing trend now in our tourism and hospitality area, as they deeply provide detailed recordings of facts while ensuring or providing a more comprehensive and holistic perspective in regards to lifestyles and or circumstances. And overall, photographs, art objects, videotapes, website main pages, emails, text messages, social media text, or any forms of sound generate the forms of qualitative audio and visual materials. And more recently, we have also benefited from the email in our qualitative case studies project. Email is also very useful for researchers or scholars to attain the data that they need. Now I am passing over our research paper, which was published by Cornell Hospitality Quarterly, and which is also co-authored. I would like to start by giving an overview about the methodology used and the data collection. The data were obtained from top-ranked hospitality and tourism journals, which are classified by CHME Journal and country rank developed by Elsevier, the Scopus database. These are journals publish the bulk of the research on the case studies. The basic reason or the main reason behind the choice of the CHME Journal and country rank as a data source is twofold. It is regarded as a size-independent indicator, and it classifies and ranks journals according to their average prestige for each article and can be used for journal comparisons in the scientific assessment process. And the unit of analysis consists of the aforementioned 10 journals, and which equals to over 800 published articles, and the 871 articles were subject to analysis, published between 1974 and 2020. Sampling of articles was based on the 3 main approaches. As I already mentioned about the sampling techniques, in our research we have benefited 3. And one was purposeful The articles possess the specific characteristics that allow an investigation of the phenomenon under study. And the second was criteria. The articles meet the research criteria as they are classified among the top high-tier hospitality and tourism journals, which is classified also by Chicago Journal and country rank. And lastly, convenience. Sample method was used. The researcher has had a chance to access necessary documents concerning the selected journals from the well-known database in the social sciences. The major hospitality and tourism journals were thus the Annals of Tourism Research, Current Issues in Tourism, and Journal of Hospitality Marketing and Management, Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Research, Journal of Sustainable Tourism, Journal of Travel Research, Journal of Travel and Tourism Marketing, International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management, International Journal of Hospitality Management and the Tourism Management were the unit of analysis for our research. And during the course of the data collection, a keyword search approach was performed, which is mostly used for systematic literature review as well in the hospitality and tourism field, from predefined key terms that were selected as the case of, a case study, the case study, and so on, by adapting the research approach of Tasçı et al., which was published in 2020. And as such, a keyword search was applied to the title of over the 800 published papers. Now you can see that on the table, the inclusion and exclusion criteria, which were applied during the data collection method and later on the analysis, which consisting of 7 steps. And book reviews, reports, research in brief, commentary papers, research letters, short communications, viewpoints, and discussion papers were excluded from our review. Only full hospitality and tourism journal peer-reviewed articles in English were included in the analysis process. Now, I would like to give an insight about the data analysis process. The thematic analysis of keywords in article titles revealed the categories of articles at the initial stage, and articles were classified independently by 2 human coders and separated into 4 groups and teams. Within each group, after the coding process was finalized. Next, the classifications were compared: qualitative, quantitative, conceptual, and the mixed methods, namely. And the high level of agreement was provided by 2 coders or authors on the teams that emerged. Any inconsistency during the data analysis process was resolved by discussion and a few modifications to accommodate inconsistencies. And disagreement about 6 articles resulted in their classification into a new category. And during the data analysis process, we have benefited from Leximancer as a qualitative data analysis software. This software differs from other because in the meantime, it can be used for quantitative data analysis process. Along with the frequency of the concepts which mostly occur, it also creates thematic clustering to map complex themes derived from the data. However, according to reviewers and editors' suggestion, we had to remove this concept map. And the primary aim of the systematic literature review that we benefited is usually to provide or ensure information to the researchers, mapping and evaluating the existing intellectual field. Sometimes can help to elicit the current gaps in the literature while building a research question to expand the current knowledge beyond the field. And also it is, as we all know, that often used by researchers to elicit all empirical evidence, which complies with the predefined inclusion criteria in response to answering a specific research question or hypothesis, if there exists. Yes, we can see here the which journal and has how many papers published and the percentage. As now we can see the results. Firstly, our first category emerged as the articles by method. The majority of studies, which is equal to 50%, employed a quantitative method, and followed by a qualitative method. The mixed method approach, including both quantitative and qualitative methods and conceptual approach. This implies the dominance of the positivist paradigm for the majority of hospitality and tourism journals. Another reason can be linked or attributed to the attitudes of journals reviewers and editors who are more prone to reject conceptual or qualitative case studies since they believe they cannot make a significant theoretical or methodological contribution to the literature. Yes, now you can see on this figure the evaluation process of the qualitative case studies, which was firstly published on 1974, and until the 2020, we could not involve the whole year in 2020. It is therefore you can see the rate to percentage of the published publications of qualitative case studies in 2020, because we have limited time, and we during the data collection method we only involved only 2 or 3 months published articles in this period. And this figure also shows that the number of published articles had a sharp increase between the 2004 and 2008, and also show a slight decrease in the number of articles published on the case studies between the period of 2008 and 2010, which can be assessed as a temporal or coincidental situation, or it might be a periodic process where this method may have reached academic saturation, maybe. Now I am passing over the articles by methods and journals as being another themes. And this figure shows that the tourism management published the most case study articles, which equals to almost 26%, which is followed by Journal of Travel and Tourism Marketing, which is based on Asia as a journal, and with the percentage of almost 13%. Taking into consideration articles by method and journal, Journal of Sustainable Tourism and the Annals of Tourism Research differ from others, as they publish more qualitative case studies more than quantitative ones. This also shows that these journals mostly consider the qualitative case studies rather than quantitative ones. Yes, now we can see the distribution of articles by method and journal. This figure reflects that a large number of case study articles were employed in Asia, mostly published by Tourism Management Journal, which is followed by Europe as a continent. In Asia, we can say that 236 publications were employed case study approach, while the 221 scholars adopted qualitative case studies in Europe continent. And the least number of published articles that adopted a case study approach was in the polar region. Now we can see the table, which is called articles by subjects and context. And the major topics areas of case studies are varied and multiple, and have consist of a wide range of fields, such as destination marketing and management and economic development of destinations, dark tourism, structure and analysis of service and hotel industry, crisis management, motivation and experiences, cultural and heritage tourism, sustainable tourism, stakeholder management, tourism governance, tourism planning, policy, innovation, sharing economy, and interrelated fields like peer-to-peer accommodation, Airbnb satisfaction, service quality, authenticity, and tourism education. This shows that from 1974 to date, or until 2020, the case study, whether quantitative or qualitative, were conducted by several scholars from multiple field of research. Another substantial issue is that the data collection and statistical techniques used in the articles that we analyzed. Most of the qualitative case studies relied on the data triangulation approach, which means that the majority of scholars benefited from more than one source of information in their research. And thus tourism researchers or scholars have tended to use observation, documentation, and archival records of published materials as secondary data to ensure or provide the trustworthiness of the research. It was also reported in the analysis that a number of more recent qualitative studies or research have used photographs and movies as visual sources of data in their research. On the other hand, the number of qualitative studies that employed or adopted participant observation was limited, while the use of the interview as preliminary data was prominent. And we also found that some of the qualitative research benefited from published materials and archival records, along with notes of field observations as a primary empirical evidence, while some studies used secondary sources such as printed and online documents as primary data sources. Online websites of travel, tourism, and hospitality organizations and travel blogs used by tourists were also utilized by many scholars in their research as a source of data. This was also substantial or compelling finding of our research. And we have also found that while tourists were mostly the unit of analysis in quantitative studies, and in qualitative case studies, the main tourism stakeholders, due to their limited numbers as the unit of analysis, and consisting of both public and private sector representatives, were the sample in qualitative case studies. And results also show that in both quantitative and qualitative case studies, the majority of research predominantly tended to use systematic literature as a review type, particularly since 2010. Also, a wide variety of quantitative methods and several different statistical methods and analysis techniques were employed, such as the analysis of variance, exploratory factor analysis, data envelopment analysis, descriptive statistics, paired sample test, and generalized least squares, and multiple regression analysis, along with the linear regression analysis. In studies using mixed methods, more than one statistical technique was found to be used at the same time. And as for the qualitative case studies, use of content analysis as a data treatment technique or method was most prevalent, which was followed by thematic analysis and discourse analysis, respectively. And more interestingly, we have also found that an increasing number of innovative data analysis techniques were recently used in quantitative case studies, such as affective mapping and mentionality of text, along with computer-assisted data analysis software, such as NVivo, Leximancer, Atlas, and MaxCUDA, etc. Now, I am passing over the conclusion and implication part of our research. Overall, study results confirm and suggest that most articles follow the positivist paradigm in case study research, and thus the majority of these articles benefited or used quantitative research methods. One of the most compelling findings is also that there is an increasing number of qualitative case studies using data analysis software to improve credibility and reliability of their research, as I have already mentioned, in the Atlas qualitative data analysis software, Leximancer, and NVivo. And more recently, there is an increasing trend for researchers and scholars who tended to use such programs, since these programs help to increase the trustworthiness in their research. There are also a handful of qualitative studies that use statistical techniques to measure the reliability of data. We have also already mentioned about that. Krippendorf of kappa analysis are the kind of statistical analysis which are mostly preferred to use in the qualitative research, including qualitative case research by tourism scholars and researchers. Study findings have also suggested that the researchers also used semi-structured interviews, published materials as a secondary data source in thematic or content analysis. And also our findings have shown that the researchers typically use case study methods while studying subjects with limited samples, such as public and private representatives, policymakers, destination marketers, managers of and non-governmental organizations, local residents, and so on. On the other hand, it has been also found in our research finding that researchers are more inclined to use quantitative methods, and when their study sample is comprised of mainly demand side, which is equal to tourists or consumers. And we have also found that a large number of studies adopt a single case study approach, while the use of a multiple case study approach is less. As we have already mentioned at the beginning of our workshop or presentations, that the multiple case studies can always be helpful to increase the qualitative case studies trustworthiness. But we can see here and understand from our research findings that the number of multiple case study approach remains rather limited as compared to a single case study approach. Our findings also have revealed that the qualitative approach is mostly used in studying tourist destination, tourism organization, owners of travel agency, tour operators, and stakeholders and employees. And on the other hand, our findings, we can say and summarize that showed the misuse or mislabel of case study terminology. Yes, now we can see the word cloud of all the keywords as a findings. As you can see, there is a misunderstanding or mislabel of case study terminology when the researcher or scholars prefer to use title for their research. We have seen and analyzed over the 800 publications related to quantitative and qualitative case study, but the most important findings for us and key findings for us was that we have seen so many titles and those who start with a case study of the case of blah blah, the case of the name of the destination where the study was carried out. But there is unfortunately no commonly held single term about the case study. Therefore, we can say that there is a mismatch of the use the term case study within hospitality and tourism field. And there are many reasons for this misuse or mislabel of case studies. First, we can say the use of qualitative case studies was dominant in the early stages of published articles in our field, while there seems to be a more recent or increasing trend in using qualitative case studies in hospitality and tourism. And there are, of course, multiple research sample techniques. For example, as I already mentioned, convenience, criterion, homogeneous, opportunistic, maximum variation, etc., which make it easier for tourism researchers and scholars to use or utilize a case study approach as a most proper research design, and while permitting them to collect data from multiple sources. And this approach is closely concerned with the triangulation, which strengthens qualitative findings related to ensuring trustworthiness. And the qualitative approaches, as we all know, in general are criticized for their lack of rigor and credibility, and thus they are usually blamed for missing the tenets of good science. And similarly, along with the reliability matter, the issue of transferability is one of the major problems. That's why the tourism scholars and researchers avoid to use qualitative case study approach for their research. And considering that the main issue of or obstacles in front of the case study approach is the legitimacy, problem of case studies, and several measures can be suggested to improve the trustworthiness of qualitative case studies. And in addition to employing purposeful sampling technique, qualitative researchers may also use some statistical techniques for their case studies to ensure, provide, or increase transferability, which means, in the meantime, the external validity of research, or more concretely, generalized ability while increasing the reliability research. And we have many suggestions to increase the trustworthiness of qualitative case studies, which may encourage researchers to use qualitative case study. Based on firstly triangulation, they can also use multiple sources of data to validate research derived from qualitative case studies. And researchers should also be encouraged to use data triangulation to make research more rigorous and credible. And they can also give special attention to adopt multiple case studies rather than single one from a comparative analysis insights in order to produce credible and more generalizable findings. And then lastly, using statistical techniques such as Krippendorf alpha or Cohen alpha, they can provide the reliability of their research data, which may increase the legitimacy of qualitative studies. And finally, now, this is all about my workshop. I hope you all enjoyed to listen this part, and I am also hoping so many questions found and the answers to make the mind clear that towards the use of qualitative case study for your research.
Thank you so much, Kadir, for that really useful presentation on case study methodology. We're a little bit over time, but if colleagues are able to stay and they would like to ask questions, Kadir, do you have time to stay for a few questions?
Yes, of course. Yes, I have more time for receiving the questions to answer. My presentation could be a little bit longer, but when at the starting point, as you can remember that we could not start on the time.
Yes.
I am sorry about that. Due to technical problem of my PC.
Don't worry about it. I'm sure everybody here enjoyed your presentation as much as I did. So it was fantastic, and we really appreciate you being here with us. So Steph has a question for you. So I'll let us start off, and then we have a question in the chat afterwards. So Steph, you want to go ahead with your question?
Be quick because of the time. So it's not directed specifically at you. It's for everyone. It's more of a philosophical debate, which I've always thought about case studies. I am a big fan of case studies. I've used case studies a lot in my research. But at the back of my head, I've always thought, is a case study actually a method, or is it a context within which you need to use other research methods? Because as you quite rightly said, when you choose your unit of analysis, you still need to use a method like semi-structured interview, focus group. So you need to use research methods in your case study. So my question to all of you researchers is case study a method? Is it actually a research method, or is it not? It's not a trick question and there's no magic answer. It's something I've always thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
You're welcome. Should I give an answer?
Yes, I think it would be great to hear your perspective of this.
Yes, I am. I will be so happy to answer the question of Stephanie. I am sorry, not the case study is not in method in itself. As I have already mentioned, that the main problem that I experienced during the data analysis, and even our unit of analysis consists of 10 leading journals. Unfortunately, we can see these mistakes in the publications published by very high top-tier journals. Case study is a kind of research design, not technique, not method. And the misunderstanding is that, I think. And as in the case of content analysis, I mostly experience and see this problem like in content analysis, because content analysis is not data collect method. It is a kind of data analysis technique. And therefore, I can say only that the case study is not method or technique. Case study is a kind of research design.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful answer.
I totally agree. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Kadir, there was a question earlier on when you were presenting your data from your paper. You said you had developed some conceptual models using like Lexi Mansa, and you said you had to remove it.
Yes, because and the third round of the reviewers, it was suggested us to remove it because that doesn't make more sense with the concepts. Of course, we adopted their suggestion, and according to the reviewer's suggestion, we have deleted it because someone within hospitality and research community, as a scholar and reviewer, do not prefer to use computer-aided programs for the data analysis, in particular for systematic literature review. And then we respect to all their ideas, and then we had to delete it, this concept map, which derived from the Lexi-Mazer program analysis, and then we sent our research and without the concept map. And
so it was a reviewer preference. Am I
yes,
correct?
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
In that, okay, thank you. Janice has her hand up, and she and they have a question.
Yes, of course.
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting. Actually, I have two questions. One is, I just checked on via my school whether it would be possible to get access to your article, which I do not have. So I was wondering if there is any chance to get access to your paper. And the second question is, I'm currently doing research on within the hospitality industry, and I'm trying to understand looking at the different understandings of ethics or ethical behavior within an organization. And I'm looking at it from a multiple stakeholder perspective, mostly internal. And I was wondering if because the stakeholder are employees, so non-managerial stakeholders, managerial stakeholders, and top management. So if that would be also considered as a single case embedded, because I understand with an embedded case studies that there are several, multiple units of analysis.
If you would like, I would like to start with second question. If you like to start with the limited number of unit of analysis, of course, yes, this approach applies and comply with the single embedded, because I also believe that the definition and the concept of the stakeholder is not well understood. I think, because local people, in some cases, local people also can be labeled as part of stakeholders in some destinations. It depends on the administrative structure of the country of destinations. For example, Germany and Switzerland, the administrative structure of these destinations are, we can say, the similar.
Okay.
But what was the first question, Janice?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I tried to look up your article.
If you wish, I can share it with you via email.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think a colleague already shared it via chat, so maybe you can access it there also.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I think I see it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Do we have any more questions for Kadir? I mean, personally, I found this really useful because I always get confused by the different types of case studies, because you have single embedded, the different approaches, and this really clarified that for me in terms of how I go about doing a case study design. But also, I really appreciated your point of view that case study is a research design. It is not a method. And I think as your findings clearly show, a lot of people are using case study as a method without thinking about the philosophy behind the use of the case study. So that's why I really liked your last slide, a case study about case study research, because I think that's quite important for us as we move forward in building our hospitality and tourism research domain. So thank you so much for your time, Kadir, and thanks to all of you for your patience with the technology to get us started and to stay until the end. And as I said before, this is being recorded, so we will share the video as soon as it's edited. And thank you all, but just a big round of applause, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Kadir, for your time.
It was my pleasure to attend and share my knowledge and information regarding our more recent research. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you. And everybody have a wonderful evening and take care and look after yourselves. And I will see you at the next CHME PDR, not PDR, PGR. I get so confused with all the acronyms, PGR workshop. So take care and be in touch and have a wonderful evening. Bye, everybody.